Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to MHAM's webinar today with Dr. Anna Flores. We'll be talking about nutrition and recovery. She is a clinical liaison for eating disorder services at Sanford Behavioral Health. If you are here today and you need CE for either McBAP or social work that we're offering today, please drop your full name in the chat stating which CE that you're requesting. And then after today's webinar, I will send you a link where you can complete the online evaluation and I will send you your certificate. I would love to introduce to you Dr. Anna Flores. She is a doctor of clinical nutrition specializing in eating disorder treatment. She completed her Master's of Science in Nutrition at the National University of Natural Medicine and her master's capstone at the Food as Medicine Institute in 2015. She completed her doctoral degree in clinical nutrition at the Maryland University of Integrative Health and her clinical residency with Holistic Performance Method Wellness in London in 2021. Anna has been doing clinical work with eating disorders since 2016 and has followed the call to this work from coast to coast, as well as internationally. Joining the Sanford Behavioral Health team from London, England, Anna is excited to see what the next chapter in Grand Rapids has in store for her and to be part of a solution in addressing the unmet needs of this population in Michigan. Her professional mission is to empower others to cultivate and nourish a positive relationship with food in their body and to inspire and support her patients on their journey towards genuine, lasting health. Her nutritional philosophy that food can be medicine and that each body deserves individualized and personal treatment guides her progressive approach, integrating traditional wisdom and the latest evidence-based treatment modalities to provide innovative, recovery-focused, compassionate care. Dr. Flores says, my clinical approach is grounded in identifying and addressing root causes as opposed to only providing a Band-Aid for symptoms. Entering a healing partnership with me means that you are seen, heard, and supported exactly as you are, and that we will work together in cultivating and nourishing a positive relationship with food. Welcome today, Dr. Anna Flores.
Thank you so much, Kristen. So this is recovery-focused nutrition with special considerations for substance use and eating disorders. Thanks for taking some time to talk about meeting a vital need for these populations who are struggling with mental and behavioral health. So I like to start this conversation first and foremost with the idea of what we're taught versus what I've learned. And when I say we, I mean all of us as people who have to exist as patients within the healthcare system, as well as health professionals and health allied professionals. So this idea that the more you know, that will then influence your choices and behaviors to create change, which will impact your weight, shape, and size, which will then impact your health. And pursuing health is a way to pursue value. I do this kind of modified as a group for substance use and eating disorder patients as well. And whenever we start here, the patients always say, that makes sense. That feels like the logic. When I'm in the room with the doctor, you know, they're telling me, hey, you got to know better, then you'll do better. You'll lose weight, you'll be healthier, you'll be more valuable, all these things. Then I like to say, show of hands, who's known better and still made the same choice? And everybody's hand goes up, right? Because we're all guilty of it in some way, shape, or form when we reflect, right? Oh, I've absolutely known better and still made the same choice. And how do we feel when we knew better and we still made the same choice? Probably not good, right? I open it up to the room and I get the same answers, right? I feel bad about myself. I feel ashamed. I feel embarrassed. I feel frustrated. I feel like I failed. I feel guilty, right? All these things. And that sort of coincided with a frustration I was having earlier in my practice, which was, if only my clients knew better, if only my clients listened. You know, I'm trying to tell them the things they need to do, and they must not know it. They must not be listening. They must not care because nothing's happening, nothing's changing. But then I reflected, well, I've known better and still made the same choice before too. So clearly knowing isn't everything when it comes to making changes in our choices and our behaviors. Additionally, let's also look at, what are we supposed to know? right? So who's heard, show of hands, eggs are good, eggs are bad, right? Who's heard coffee's good for you, coffee's bad for you? Who's heard meat is good for you, meat is bad for you, right? So, and we could go on and on and on with almost any food imaginable. And so there's that piece too of, yes, knowledge is power and it's important. I'm not saying that it's not important, but I am saying, one, it's not the end all be all, right? It's not the driving force, primary driving force for making changes in our behaviors all of the time. Additionally, it's overwhelming when we have access to so much information. Knowledge is powerful, but knowing what? So this is kind of the first link in the chain that we start to break down a little bit. I'm not saying that this relationship isn't there. I'm saying maybe it's not as direct as we all act like it is. And in acting like this is so direct and so easy and so straightforward is missing the point of what it is to be a human having a human experience, and drives that shame, right? That guilt, that embarrassment, that frustration, that sadness, that I messed up feeling. And by working with patients from that lens, we're driving something that could be inherently defeating, right? What about our choices and our behaviors and their impact on our weight, shape, and size? I'm sure a lot of us have heard, if you just make different choices, have different behaviors, your weight is going to be different. I can tell you, as somebody who's been working in the field for eight or 9 years now, that's not the rule. And there aren't just, this is the rule and there are some exceptions. It's actually quite a vast array of people who say I did the right things and my weight didn't change. What is that telling us? Well, if we all ate the same way and moved the same way, over a week, would we all be the same weight, shape, and size? No, right? If we ate the same way and moved the same way, after a year, all of us in this webinar right now, in a year, would we all be the same weight, shape, and size? No, right? Even in 10 years, and there's actually research that shows this as well. Multiple people can eat the same way, move their bodies the same way, and they will never in any amount of time, oh, we got mood lighting now, they will never in any amount of time all be the same weight, shape, and size because of body diversity. Bodies are meant to come in a diverse range of weight, shapes, and sizes. It's just like I can't eat differently and be able to swap shoes with Shaquille O'Neal. Why? Because it's not all in my control, and because there's body diversity here. I'm not meant to be the same weight, shape, and size as that other person. So it's kind of another piece here to break down, right? And to say that your choices and your behaviors are the things that are dictating your weight, shape, and size is, again, short-sighted, and it's an oversimplification. Does it mean that your choices and your behaviors don't have an impact on those things? No, right? That there's some influence there, but to say that it's the end all be all, that it's the primary driver, that it's this simple, right? It's this linear, is missing the point of a much more complex system. And I won't open up genetics, right? But there's this whole piece of genetics in here too. And the next bit, our weight and our health. I have a story I'd like to share from a client who, like I said, I do a almost identical version of this for clients all the time. I don't think that we should sit on this information and share it just for us as clinicians and practitioners. And I said, who's been told that their weight, their health is directly influenced by their weight? And somebody raised their hand, and a gentleman said, I actually have a story to tell about that. I really would like to know your thoughts on it. He said, my doctor has been telling me I need to lose 20 pounds. I need to lose 20 pounds. I'd be so much happier if I lost 20 pounds. I'd be so much, better if I lost 20 pounds. All these things in my life would be better, especially my health. He says, you'll be so much healthier. Just lose 20 pounds. And I said, okay. And what do you think? And he said, well, I came to Sanford. I'm getting treatment for my substance use disorder. I haven't lost 20 pounds, but I've also never felt healthier since I stopped using meth. And it's like, yeah, that makes sense to me, because there are more things that impact our health than just our weight, shape, and size. Your body's actually not a billboard. Can it tell us some information about what's going on the inside? Yes. the people who are able to decipher that are trained professionals. So regardless of our own opinions of what their body is telling us about their health status, unless you have specialized training in nutrition focused physical exam, for example, you're actually not qualified to make that determination, regardless of what the media tells us, right? Or any, social media, whatever it might be, tells us. So yeah, weight. I mean, I've also had clients who've said, hey, my weight changed and my health did change, right? So again, it's not to say that there aren't instances where these two things are connected, but to say that it is this linear, that is this exact, is again missing the point, becoming short-sighted. And so the point of this beginning of the conversation is to really build that perspective of where we're kind of going to go in our conversation together. And then this last bit, health is valuable. So you need to be losing weight to be healthier because that's how you're valuable. Let's take a moment and think about that. Are people who are in wheelchairs, right, who will never be quote unquote healthy, to what someone might determine as healthy, right? They won't be able to use their legs, let's say. Are they less valuable? Oh, well, no, right? Babies that are born without 5 fingers and 5 toes, maybe they got maybe that 4 on this hand or whatever it is. Are they less valuable? Well, they're not healthy. No. What about babies that are born with chronic conditions? Maybe they need, to repair a hole in their heart, or maybe, they only have 1 kidney or something like that. So they're not quote unquote healthy. Are they less valuable? When I ask these questions, everybody in the room says, no, no, no. Okay. So again, we're able to say that very clearly and very quickly about others. Where's the disconnect about ourselves? You don't actually owe anybody health. And that's not to say that pursuing health isn't something that could be valuable for you, but to say, I need to be healthy to be valuable, especially in individuals who are experiencing a relapsing remitting disease like substance use or eating disorders, can be a very challenging logic. So now that we've kind of I'll talk about this for the whole hour, so I'm going to make myself move on. So now that we've got some perspective here, let's move forward. So what does influence health? This is a pie chart. It's a pizza pie chart because nutrition. So it's a pizza pie chart of determinants of health. And what is this telling us? So if what we just sort of broke down to build a little bit of perspective of the bigger picture surrounding health, it's not just boiled down to weight. It's not just boiled down to, your choices, your behaviors, or the things that and your ability to control those things. What does it come down to, right? That's just one piece. It's not the whole picture. 40%, and this is population research. This is a group of people, right, in any given location. So 40% of a population's health is actually impacted and determined by socioeconomic factors. So education, job status, family and social support, income, right? All these things, community, all these things. And there's way more that we could list here, right? 10% physical environment. So what's the air quality like? What's the water quality like? Is there a green space, right? Do you have access to that green space? All these things. Right off the bat, I know you can't see it as clearly because it's not a circle pie chart, right? But right off the bat, 40% and 10%, we've got 50%. So about half of the influencers of health for a population. What do these things have in common? Zip code. So 50% can be traced back to your zip code. So where you live matters when it comes to your health. And I don't know if any of you have heard of blue zones. It's a phrase that seems to come in and out of, it's kind of like a fad phrase, right? It becomes popular and then it sort of dies down and it becomes popular again. And I read my first article on blue zones when I was like 10 years old, I think, in a magazine online at the grocery store. So this always seems to pop up, this idea of blue zones. And a blue zone, if you're unfamiliar with it, is an area where people who live there seem to live more than in other areas, right? So a disproportionate amount of people live to 80, 90, 100 and further. Places like to sell you, the blue zone diet or move like this. People who live in blue zones do this. If 50% of the social determinants of health for a population are their zip code, you probably would have a better shot moving to a blue zone, right? So they've already had an advantage because they live in a blue zone. 30% of social determinants of health are health behaviors. So I have on here tobacco use, diet and exercise, alcohol, and sexual activity. We could probably expand this to about 7 or 8 factors, right? So substance use, how you eat, how you move your body, sexual activity and sexual health, as well as, let's see, there's always 7 or 8 of them. How you eat, how you move. Oh, rest and relaxation. I always forget that one because I'm go myself. Rest and relaxation, as well as sleep hygiene. And rest and relaxation, that one is also kind of like coping. So sleep is its own factor. It's separate from non-sleep rest, relaxation, and also coping. So how we deal with stress, right? Stress management and coping. So those are some things that we've got maybe more choice and more influence over as an individual. And then 20% is healthcare, but not just healthcare, but your access to healthcare and the quality of the care that you're receiving. So I'm going to tell another story from a gentleman in a group who was receiving treatment for substance use disorder. And he was sitting there listening intently to this, but his expression, he was like kind of gobsmacked. He was like, and I thought, is this not landing? You know, I want to know more about what this person's experience is right now. So I said, talk to me, what's going on? I can draw this as a circle, right? If it's, you know, challenging to visualize, or we can talk about a different way, what's going on. He said, no, his words, right? I spent my whole life beating myself up about my stomach and the fact that it's bigger than I think it should be. It's bigger than what people tell me it should be. It's bigger than what I see in media and all these things. I've been beating myself up about it. And, you know, I even started driving an hour away to go to this fancy health food store that has, right? So he wanted to go to Whole Foods, and he said, you know, or whatever it was called. And I'm driving really far to go and buy organic food specifically, and I'm paying more money for it. And it puts, you know, a big stress on me and my family financially. And I go through these, you know, jags of going and not going, and because of the money and all these other things and the time. And I've just been beating myself up about it. And I said, okay, well, let's look, not that this, you know, applies to the individual perfectly because it's population research. So to say it applies to the individual, you know, directly would be lazy science, but you know, we can adapt, we can relate, we can translate some of this to an individual's experience. And he said, well, when I look at this, I think I work at a chemical factory. I don't necessarily have job security. He has some kind of contracting thing as part of his job. So he has to like bid for the contract to continue working for a certain amount of time. So he says, you know, I don't have job security. Which means I don't have income security. I work for this chemical factory. I live near the chemical factory. So he recognizes that the air and water quality of where he spends most of his time is probably less than ideal in terms of supporting his health. He was an alcoholic. For 30 years. He was a smoker for 20 years. He also shared that he, you know, had access to healthcare, but he didn't feel like it was quality healthcare. And I said, okay, and you've been making yourself feel really bad about your health and saying it's your fault, right? How much do you think organic carrots are going to change things, my friend? Right. And again, Kristen started this by saying I'm a doctor of clinical nutrition. So I've made food and nutrition my life's work. And so I'm not saying that that isn't important, but again, building some perspective that there's so much more going on, right, than just the things that we've decided are important or impactful. There are some things that are in our control and some things that aren't as well. And so again, saying, and especially beating himself up that he wasn't eating organic specifically, right? While he's in treatment for substance use disorder, where he's being empowered in his decision-making in the areas of his life that he has control over. I don't want that to be eclipsed, right, by this idea of shame and by this narrative that we tell ourselves about who we're supposed to be and how we're supposed to live. And so, especially when it comes to food, giving ourselves grace, recognizing that being a person is a complex experience and we can't always do it perfect or do it right. And that's actually part of doing it right, is not doing it perfect all the time. I'm taking a pause in case there are any questions. Doesn't seem like there are. So let's move forward. Let's talk about the nutrition now that we've sort of set the stage and built some perspective. This is a nutritional priorities pyramid. And you'll notice that I haven't started this presentation by saying, this is what an eating disorder is. This is what substance use disorder is, because good nutrition applies to anybody. I use this with every population that I work with. At the bottom here, we've got adequacy. That means eating enough, plain and simple. Adequate nutrition starts with, are you getting enough food? And I recognize that food security is a privilege, right? Getting enough food on a regular basis is a privilege. And so this might be where a lot of people do the majority of their work in terms of their relationship with food and feeding themselves, right? Maybe they're just working on getting enough consistently. We start here. If there's inadequate nutrition, we start here. I don't really care as much as if it's, balanced or the right foods or the wrong foods or whatever we tell ourselves, right? Let's just get you getting enough. I would much rather a person I had, when I first started working in the eating disorder field, we were taking our teenagers and in residential treatment for eating disorder, so very sick teenagers, to McDonald's. And I had just finished my master's degree and was up in arms about this food isn't good for us and it's bad for us and we can't take these. I didn't say this in front of the clients, but to my supervisor behind closed doors, this food isn't good and why are we taking these sick people to eat this food that's not going to help them and it's going to hurt them, and I'm just all up in it about it. And she said, I hear you. And one of those girls is a 16-year-old girl. She plays high school basketball. After basketball, after the game, whether they win or they lose, they go out to McDonald's either to celebrate their victory or to, commiserate together in their loss. Do you want her to be able to nourish her body as best she can in that environment and to have the experience that a normal teenager has? Or do you want her to get inadequate nutrition? Do you want her to choose her eating disorder and restrict her food intake because it's not good enough for her? And it was like my ignorance, right? I would much rather any human being be able to find a route to adequate nutrition in the circumstances in their life that make their life worth living than not get enough food. So adequate nutrition, getting enough. What does that look like? Through about 3 meals a day, maybe 4 for some people, and some snacks, 0 to 3 snacks per day. Adequate nutrition. The next bit here that builds on adequacy is balance. What's important about balanced nutrition is macronutrients. So those are our carbohydrates, our proteins, and our fats. Macronutrients and getting balanced nutrition means we're getting all 3. We're getting proteins, we're getting fats, we're getting carbohydrates. If you grew up in the 80s, you probably were told eat fat-free, right? So what you've done is you've cut out one of those 3 macronutrients. So the majority of those people didn't get balanced nutrition on a regular basis, right? Because they were cutting out a food group. I get clients with eating disorders. A big one that people seem to eliminate is carbohydrates, right? Okay, so maybe you're getting enough nutrition. Maybe you're not, right? We got to start with adequacy, but then let's look at balance. Oh, you're not eating any carbohydrates. They're all important to eat a balanced diet. So we need all 3. We need proteins, we need fats, we need carbohydrates, we need all 3 of them. And I'll talk about fiber later, which is a specific kind of carbohydrate that's particularly important for Americans, because Americans as a whole are not necessarily deficient in carbohydrates, but they are, generally speaking, deficient in fiber, which is a specific kind of carbohydrate found in fruits and vegetables primarily, as well as whole grains. The next bit is variety. So let's say we've got a plate of food and it's enough food for you for the meal, so it's adequate, and it's also balanced. Let's say that we've got, alongside macronutrients for balanced nutrition, I also like to think about the food groups too. So fruits and veggies, meats and vegetarian proteins, grains and starches, fats and oils, and dairy. So I like to think about those things too. So we've got that plate of food. I'm kind of visualizing it right here. So imagine a plate here, and on that plate, so it's enough food for the meal for you. Let's say that you've got a steak. I always say this example because it's what I can draw when I have a whiteboard. So you've got a steak. I always draw like a T-bone. So you've got a steak, you've got a potato, maybe with some sour cream and butter on it, and maybe chives too, because that sounds lovely. And then some broccoli with maybe a little oil and vinegar. So what do we have on that plate? We've got enough food. Do we have protein, fats, and carbs? Let's check. We have protein from the steak. We have carbohydrates from the potato. There's also some carbohydrates in that broccoli. And then we've got fats. Okay, we've got some sour cream and some butter on that potato. But then let's check that we also have the 5 food groups. So we've got fats and oils, that's from the butter. We've got dairy from the sour cream. We've got carbs and grains and starches, that's the potato. We've got fruits and veg from the broccoli, and we've got our protein from the meat. So beautiful. It's adequate. It's balanced. Loving this. Let's say I eat that for every meal, every day, forever, or for any extended amount of time, right? For months. What am I missing out on? Hint, it's the next part of the pyramid. Variety. Why is variety important? Because you could argue, well, it's enough nutrition for you and it's balanced nutrition. So what's the big deal? Variety ensures that we meet our micronutrient needs. So vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, those are found, kind of chemicals found in plant foods specifically. Amino acids, these are the building blocks that make up different proteins. Fatty acids, the building blocks that make up different fats. Variety is really important. So we had broccoli on our example plate. You're going to get a fair bit of calcium from the broccoli. So you might meet your mineral need for calcium in that plate, but you're not going to get a ton of vitamin C. A good food source of vitamin C that we all know, oranges, right? So variety is important, right? Sometimes we just swap out that fruit or vegetable that we have on the plate for a different one because that one is going to have more of different nutrients. And the same thing, not just for fruits and vegetables, but for grains and starches as well, right? Potatoes are very high in potassium. Very great source of potassium. However, they're not that high in fiber, right? Which is that special kind of carbohydrate that I mentioned that we all need. So swapping a potato out for, let's say, a different grain or starch like brown rice, it's actually going to give you maybe less potassium, but more fiber. Or a sweet potato, which is going to give you more vitamin A than a regular potato would, and maybe more fiber. The same thing with meats, right? So if you put the same amount of grams of protein from a protein source. So let's say we have a pile of steak that has, let's say, 20 grams of protein, a serving of steak with 20 grams of protein, a serving of 20 grams of protein from eggs, and 20 grams of protein from beans, and 20 grams of protein from chicken, and all these different protein sources, we line them up. We could say from a balance perspective, right, a macronutrient perspective, they all have the same amount of protein in them. However, they're all going to have different micronutrients and different amino acid levels, the things that make up proteins. So variety is really important to ensure that we're meeting those micronutrient needs as well, which are just as important as the macronutrient needs. I don't know if any of you have heard research about processed meats. Don't eat them, they're bad for you, right? Don't eat hot dogs, they're bad for you. Don't eat deli meat, it's bad for you. Don't eat sausage, it's bad for you. I actually chose to use that research in part of my master's capstone in exploring, are these claims worth listening to, right? Because we acknowledged in the beginning that there's all these claims about food and health, and it's tough because they're contradictory. What did the research show? It showed that people who ate processed meat, so sources of their main protein source came from processed meats. So things like hot dogs and sausages, and deli meats and things like that. People who ate them as their primary protein source almost every day, right, on almost all their meals, had a greater risk of gastrointestinal cancers. And people who didn't, right? However, people who ate them sometimes, who had a variety of protein sources, and processed meats were a part of that variety, had just as low a risk as people who never ate them at all. So what does that tell me? It doesn't tell me what we want it to say is, well, processed meats must cause gastrointestinal cancer, right? That's what we want to say because it's easier to make the logic that direct. However, what it is telling us, in my interpretation of that, well, if people who have it sometimes as a part of a variety of different protein sources in their diet don't have an increased risk, maybe it's not that food causes it. Maybe it's that if it's only that food and nothing else, so the lack of variety that causes it. So a lack of variety in your protein sources can increase your risk for different diseases. Well, that's interesting. Why is that? Because variety is important for meeting our micronutrient needs. So when we only eat one type of food to meet a need, and whether it's processed meat or let's choose a health food, right? Let's say it's brown rice instead of any other grain or starches, right? Labeled a health food, say brown rice. The research is going to show the same thing. Why? Because brown rice doesn't meet all of our nutritional needs. It doesn't meet all of our micronutrient needs. There's no perfect food. And so it's not that the food makes you sick. It's that if you only eat that food, you're not eating other foods, which means you're setting yourself up to miss out on nutrients that other foods provide. The next piece above variety is flexibility. What does that mean? Flexibility means feeding yourself as best you can in any situation. So I have some clients who follow a rule that they can't eat after 8 p.m. What if you get stuck at work and then you're in traffic, there's an accident, and you get home at 8:30? You're going to miss out on dinner? Well, now you've set yourself up for inadequate nutrition for the sake of this rule that you've made. And so you think that it's serving your nutritional status, but it's taking it away when you can't find flexibility. So flexibility is the opposite of rigidity, right? And again, it's meeting your nutritional needs as best you can in any situation. So another example might be, oh, well, I don't eat, bread. Mm-hmm. And if lunch is sandwiches, you went to an event and the lunch is sandwiches, we're going to figure out how to meet our needs as best we can in that situation to ensure that we are feeding ourselves as opposed to not. And on top is enjoyment. This is not up here because I am not a therapist, right? So it's not up here because of all the touchy-feely things you enjoy enjoyment. Yes, I agree with all those things. I work very closely with therapists, so I love feelings. But it's actually up there because you have taste buds for a reason. So we have evolved to derive an experience, a sensory experience when we're eating, to taste our food, to smell our food, to see our food, to have the sensation of very crunchy, soft, smooth, whatever it is, and to enjoy that experience, right? We have evolved to derive a sensory experience from our food, and enjoyment is a part of it. It's important to tap into that because it's hardwired into our bodies. So all of these things are important. I fashion them in a pyramid, not because the one on top is the most supreme or it's the smallest, so it's least important. It's not like that at all. It's because they all build on top of each other and are interdependent. So if we, pull one out of the pyramid, it's not going to be as strong, right? So they all work together and they're all important. And this is working with any population, right? Talking about food. So let's narrow in on the makings of an adequate and balanced meal. You'll notice I look over here. It's just because there's a clock here and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So that's why I'm doing that. The makings of an adequate and balanced meal. Let's start at the foundation, right? The foundation of the pyramid, adequate nutrition and balanced nutrition. What are carbohydrates and what do they do? Carbohydrates provide fast or slow energy. You may have heard of a simple carb or a complex carb. There's a picture of that here on the slide. So the single blue hexagon, that's a simple carbohydrate. All the blue hexagons, that's a complex carbohydrate. They were named that because of their chemical structure. So one's a simple molecule, one's a complex molecule. That doesn't tell me anything about how it's feeding me. So I like to think of them as fast or slow energy. So a simple carbohydrate is going to give you fast energy. Why? Because that molecule of sugar is right there and it's readily available for your body to absorb. This complex molecule here, this one provides slower energy. Why? Because your body has to break down the bonds that are holding each of those hexagons together before it can absorb and utilize that sugar molecule. So it's going to take a little longer, right, for that chemical action to happen, for those sugar molecules to be liberated from the complex molecule to be absorbed. Some examples of a fast carb or a simple carbohydrate, white sugar. It's a perfect example. That one is going to be, those molecules are just kind of hanging out by themselves and they're very, very rapidly absorbed and utilized in your body for energy. A complex molecule might be something like, so we can use white bread, another simple molecule, right? White flour is a simple molecule, versus whole wheat bread, which is a complex or slow carbohydrate. The fiber in complex molecules is usually what helps make it digest a little bit slower, break down a little bit slower, which means that that sugar is not absorbed as quickly, and therefore the energy is slower utilized. Every single organ system in your body needs carbohydrates for energy. I've done the research. I always try to poke holes in the things that I say, especially when I make sweeping statements. Every organ system in your body can utilize carbohydrates for energy. Excess carbohydrates are also stored in your muscles in the form of glycogen for endurance, which is why people who are going to do an activity that, well, I mean, endurance, we could say endurance. I don't really love that word there, but to be able to access it for energy when there's not as much sugar circulating in your blood. So somebody who's going to run a marathon or a race, what do they do beforehand? They carbo load, right? Yeah, because any of the carbohydrates that they don't use immediately will be stored in their muscles as glycogen. And then when they're asking those muscles to do work, they use it up. So they provide fast or slow energy. A little bit of information about fiber, that's that specific type of carbohydrate that most Americans are deficient in. This one's found in complex carbs or slow carbs, so fruits or vegetables and whole grains. They promote regularity of your gastrointestinal system. They regulate your cholesterol levels. They support detoxification and elimination. They help us to feel full in the moment. And they also help us to balance blood sugar. So carbohydrates give us energy. That's what they do. So if we were to look at the satisfaction or the energy from these different macronutrients, this is what they would look like. And this scale, right, on the horizontal axis here, the x-axis, the scale is time, a continuum of time. We can also think of it as hunger. And so a simple carbohydrate or a fast energy carb like sugar is this first one that I've circled in red here. So you'll notice, because it's fast energy, right? It's going to give you energy now, but it's not going to last very long. And that's okay when you need energy now, right? When we get over hungry, why do we reach for sweets? Because our body knows it's going to give us energy now. And it's just trying to keep us alive for as long as it can right now. It's not thinking long-term when you're very hungry or when you're in a deficit for energy. This next one is starch. So this is a slower, right? So it's a little bit slower than a fast carb, but it's not that much slower. And it lasts a little bit longer. So you'll notice in terms of feeling hungry again or over time, how much longer a more complex molecule is going to last. Let's talk about proteins. What is protein and what does it do? Proteins are utilized for structure and function in the body. They are the building block for nearly all organ systems. So building, repairing, and maintaining your body, you need proteins to do it. It makes up every single organ tissue. Again, I tried to poke holes in this. I couldn't find any organ systems that didn't utilize proteins to build, repair, or maintain them. Proteins are also carriers in the body. So they carry oxygen in your bloodstream. They are antibodies for fighting illnesses. They also shuttle energy into cells. So this graphic here, don't be overwhelmed by all the shapes. It's simply showing us the orange circle here is a cell in your body. The yellow dots are glucose or sugar that's in your blood for energy. And this blue guy here, this insulin receptor, this is a protein. So insulin, a signaling molecule, attaches to the protein and says, hey, there's sugar in the blood. There's glucose available for energy in your blood. And then the protein says, great, thanks for that message. Let the glucose in, right? And that's what's happening in the second picture here, where the yellow ones are going into the cell. So proteins are very, very important. Proteins also help to balance blood sugar through this action right here, right? They allow the blood sugar to be utilized. They also help us help the meal stick with us. So the difference between having a baked potato for a meal versus steak and a potato, protein is the thing that's going to help that meal stick with us. And why is that? Because this is what protein looks like over time in terms of how it satisfies us. So it takes a little bit longer for the satisfaction from that protein to kick in, but it lasts much longer. So you'll notice, right? The simple carbohydrates are getting broken down first and giving us energy now. And right when that energy starts to run out, the more complex carbohydrates are starting to get broken down and give us energy. And when the energy from the complex carbohydrates starts to run out in terms of our digestion and absorption, at this point, the proteins are ready to be utilized and give us energy, right? And nourish our bodies. What is fat and what does it do? Fat is also important for structure and function in the body. It insulates our cells and our tissues and protects our body. It's a building block for hormones, our cell membranes, and structural support. So this cell, the outside of it, just look at the outside really. That's the cell membrane. And what is the cell membrane made of? The image below, that's kind of like a zoom in. It's made up of fats. What happens when you mix oil and water? Well, you can't, right? They separate. So why is wrapping every cell in your body in fat important? Because it makes sure that the liquid that's in the cell stays in the cell, and the liquids that are outside the cell stay outside the cell. The fat acts as that barrier, just like oil and water will separate. So fats are so important for keeping the integrity of your cells, keeping all the things inside, and everything that needs to be outside, outside. But then it's such a good barrier. How does anything that's supposed to get in, get in? These things that are embedded in the cell membrane, those are proteins. And what are the proteins doing? They're letting in the carbohydrates for energy. So all of these macronutrients are working together kind of on a big scale, but also on as small a scale as one cell. So nutrition, the food that we're eating truly is nourishing our body from kind of our whole body perspective, but also from a cellular perspective. Fats also support the absorption of certain vitamins. So vitamin A, for example, is a fat-soluble vitamin. Fat-soluble vitamins are vitamin A, D, E, and K. We can't really absorb them or utilize them without fats. So if we're not eating fats in our diet, we're actually not able to absorb and utilize fat-soluble vitamins appropriately. Vitamin A is really essential for our eye health and maintaining our eyesight. Vitamin K is very essential in our blood clotting processes. So these are things that are vitally important for our life. Fats also help us to feel satisfied. So we've looked at this whole picture. Fats are the last ones. Fats take the longest to break down, absorb, and utilize. They're also the ones that help us to stay satisfied. So when we build a meal that's balanced, right, with proteins, fats, and carbohydrates and all of the food groups, we're ensuring that our energy needs that we have right now are met. Our energy needs when those fast carbs wear off are met, that the meal is sticking with us, right? With the protein helps us stick with us. And if there's fat, it ensures that we feel satisfied. This is a simple guide. This is a macronutrient guide, proteins, carbs, and fats. That's just a Venn diagram. This is not in any way exhaustive or perfect, but I give this to clients all the time to say, hey, these are foods that the main nutrient you're getting are carbohydrates. You'll notice that's fruits, vegetables, and whole grains, but also simple starches and simple grains as well, like white pasta is on there too, or white sugar is on there too. Things that give us carbohydrates and protein, so the overlap, these are going to be vegetarian protein sources, usually are the ones that are going to give us carbohydrates and proteins. So think beans, lentils, split peas, tofu is in there too for sure. Things that give us the primary nutrient is protein are animal meats and fish. Things that give us proteins and fats, dairy, fatty fish, eggs, nuts, and seeds. And then predominantly fats, these are going to be things like olive oil. There's cod liver oil is on here. I don't know if anybody's cooking with that necessarily. I'm not. It's not really a heat stable fat. But right, liquid oils, olives, avocado, they have seeds on here too. Seeds are definitely primarily oils as well. This is something that you could utilize as it is, or if you want to explore, again, I don't tell people what to do anymore because I've learned that that's not usually how behavior change works. So a suggestion, if you're exploring your relationship with food and how you feed yourself, you could make this blank and then at every meal, write in or draw or fill in however you want, where what you're eating is between carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. And maybe you notice if you're my husband. The carbohydrates are just white pasta, rice, and potato, right? And the proteins might be chicken and beef, and the fats might be, you know, oils from the meats, bacon fat, let's say, right? And olive oil. That exercise might tell you, hey, I don't really have a lot of variety, right? If I only have 3 things in my carbohydrate column, and oh, wait a minute, they're all grains and starches, I'm missing out on fruits and vegetables. And those are important because they ensure that getting those foods ensures that I meet all of my micronutrient needs. So I'm talking about all of these things again in a broader context because they work for all of these populations, all behavioral health populations. And I use these with clients consistently and also with myself and those around me who ask. So definitely helpful. Another way of looking at nourishment is a plate of food. So every meal for the most part starts with a plate. What does the food on that plate look like? This is what it would look like if I was eating a salad. Probably half would be fruits or vegetables. And then I'd also have some proteins and some carbs or starches. Fats or oil, right? That might be the dressing. Optional dairies. Not everybody can digest dairy well or has the genes turned on to do that. So I don't recommend dairy at every meal or snack. I do that as tolerated. And then also water to hydrate. So this is what a salad would look like. I don't know if any of you have had a salad and felt hungry in an hour or two. Were there carbs or starches as a part of that meal? Probably not, right? If I have a big bowl of lettuce and cucumbers and tomatoes and onions, and that sounds really delicious and lovely, the carbs and starches are what's going to, right, that graph we looked at, those are going to last a little bit longer. And then I need the protein for it to stick with us. I need the fat to feel satisfied. It's the same if you eat a salad and you don't put dressing on it and you're like, I could just keep eating and eating and eating. Yeah, because you need to feel satisfied from the food that you're eating for the hormonal signaling process to happen to say, hey, you're done eating now. So all of them are important. Your plate might look like one of these as well. So if I'm eating macaroni and cheese, half that plate is going to be grains or starches, right? Half that plate's going to be the macaroni, maybe all of the plate, depending on the day. Yesterday, it was the whole plate. So it just depends on the day and the meal. And none of these are better or worse than any of the other ones. And again, if we're eating with variety and flexibility, we would want our meals to look like a variety of different proportions of these nutrients on a regular basis. But again, kind of reminding ourselves that all of them do have a place. How big that section on the plate that they take up is different. So you might notice, hey, half my plate is grains and starches. I put rice on one side, and the other half was, you know, a chicken thigh and a drumstick. The other half was protein. Maybe that's something that you've noticed after hearing this, and you think maybe I could explore what making a little sliver of a wedge of fruits and vegetables might look like for me sometimes. Some additional considerations for substance use and eating disorder. Frequent meals and snacks, 3 to 4 meals a day, 0 to 3 or 1 to 3 snacks per day, depending on the hunger signaling and the level of care that's appropriate for that patient. This is to support renourishment and healing. I always ask a question when I'm talking about getting adequate nutrition. I say, who in this room, you know, when they were active in their eating disorder or active in their substance use was eating regularly and consistently and meeting their nutritional needs? Show of hands. And they all look around like, is it her first day? Yeah. So for me, the most important thing in healing would be having regular meals and snacks, because we know for a fact you weren't doing that when you were active in your addiction. So let's ensure adequate nutrition now as the foundation in your healing. So eating regularly is a part of that. The number one factor of recurrence in substance use is a craving. What is a craving? Well, when it comes to how the brain is wired, the more you use a pathway in your brain, right? The more you utilize a connection in your brain, the more you will use it. So think about the shortcut from your front door to your driveway. You might have like a beautiful little path with pavers and whatever it is, but maybe there's a more direct route. And you're in a rush and you tromp through the grass or the flowers or whatever's there to get there. And then you're in a rush again and you use it again and again and again. Now suddenly that pathway is not, I think maybe someone walked on the grass. It's actually worn in and worn down. There's no more grass or flowers there anymore. It's worn out. And then maybe you use it so frequently that you say, who am I kidding? Let me put some pavers down, because if the grass keeps trying to grow, it's actually getting in the way of me doing it, getting to where I need to go in an efficient way. Our brain is no different. Our brain is so efficient. So in substance use, something comes up. There's something in the body that says, I have a need. And what does that individual do? They reach for their substance to meet that need. The more they use that pathway, the more they acknowledge that connection, the more they will use it, the stronger it becomes. And so you're not sitting down and thinking, am I hungry? Am I thirsty? Am I tired? Am I stressed? Did someone just hurt my feelings? You're not thinking that when you have a craving. You're saying, I have a need, I have a need, I have a need, right? Alarm bells in your brain, and you're reaching for your substances. What is extreme hunger? It's an alarm bell in your brain that says, I have a need, I have a need. And so what have people in their substance use potentially done? They've conditioned their brain to reach for their substances. And so it's not that hunger is dangerous. It's those extreme signals that say, I have a need, I have a need, I have a need, that can mistake those needs for cravings for substances, when really it's, I'm exhausted, or I'm starving, or I'm so thirsty, or I'm very stressed out. And so eating consistently and regularly, right, every 4 to 6 hours is very important. One, just as a protective factor in potential cravings. To round it out, some additional considerations for substance use: emphasizing fruits and vegetables, whole grains, nuts and seeds, and meats. I say emphasize, not only. So this is, if you're not eating these things, let's think about how it might look for you to include them, if that's something that you're open to exploring. And if they are a part of your diet regularly and consistently, what would emphasizing those? So ensuring, right, that an adequate serving of those is at every opportunity to nourish your body. Why do I say this? This is the liver. These are detoxification pathways. What you really need to look at here is that there's multiple phases to detoxify a substance from the body, and that there are a lot of nutritional inputs needed. So down at the bottom, nutrients needed, right? So there's B vitamins there, there's minerals there, there's enzymes there, there's amino acids, there's all these nutrients that we need to detoxify things from our body. Substance use patients have been asking their liver to detoxify on full whack, right? To do so in a way that it wasn't evolved to. Our liver did not evolve to be detoxifying substances all the time. And so I know that they've all driven deficiencies in these nutrients that are needed. And so why do I say to emphasize these foods? Because these are the most nutrient dense food sources of those specific nutrients that I know every substance use patient is deficient in. So I don't say only include them, but I do say emphasize them, right? Because they're very important. And if you're looking to heal yourself through nutrition, or to utilize your nutrition to maximize your healing, this is one way to do that. Lactose intolerance development. This is a really interesting one. For the sake of time, I'm going to scoot forward, but Google it if you want to. The research is very, very interesting. Additional considerations for eating disorder. So on top of all the things I've spoken about, eating regularly and consistently to support healing and bodily reconditioning. Fun fact, less than 6% of eating disorder sufferers present as underweight. Less than 6% of eating disorder sufferers present as underweight. That means that the stereotype of the thin person suffering from an eating disorder is inaccurate or misrepresentative of the majority of people who are suffering from this disease. Additionally, it ties back to what I started this talk with, this perspective building surrounding weight and what it says about our health. Your body weight is not a reflection of your health. It's also not a reflection of your nutritional status. I've had patients who are 300 or 400 pounds and significantly malnourished and very sick. And they're not sick because of their weight. They're sick because of their malnutrition. They have significant nutritional deficits. I've had patients who are very underweight who've also had significant nutritional deficits. So our body tells us something, but it's not enough information to make generalized sweeping claims. Eating regularly and consistently is important for any person who is struggling with an eating disorder or disordered eating, regardless of their weight, shape, and size. It supports healing in the body, reconditioning, re-nourishing. A meal plan for one of those individuals is prescription-based. It's just like a prescription. It's a medicine. Don't adjust the dosage without speaking to a nutrition professional. The same way you wouldn't tell somebody, hey, let's tweak your Valium, unless that you are a psychiatrist, right? Or without consulting with a psychiatrist and saying, maybe you need to make that recommendation. A meal plan is a tool. It is a saving grace and a recovery for an individual with an eating disorder. All foods fit. What does that mean? That means let's focus on adequacy. Let's build in balance. Let's mindfully challenge foods that are uncomfortable in their eating disorder to increase variety and practice flexibility, reminding the patient that they deserve to enjoy their food and explore what it looks like for them. Giving these patients unconditional permission to eat and saying you deserve food and nourishment unconditionally. So not because you exercised today or not because you were, a good girl today or whatever it is, you actually just deserve it for existing, plain and simple. Cooking for yourself and others. You'll notice I have that here for eating disorders and also for substance use. Why? Because 3 things that people who have maintained long-term recovery, whether it was from substance use or eating disorders, what they have in common is that they express themselves daily, whether that's through journaling or communication style or art or dance, or they are doing something to express themselves, and they're also potentially adding in a reflective piece. They are building self-esteem and sense of capability, and they are utilizing their support system. They're reaching out for help at the first sign. So cooking for yourself and others promotes creativity. Maybe you're trying a new recipe or a new food, right? There's some exploration, some expression. It also reminds you that you can take care of yourself. Whether you just had the energy to pour a bowl of cereal and milk in the morning, hey, pat yourself on the back, don't beat yourself up, because what did you do? You took the time to take care of yourself and meet your needs, and to meet your needs through something that was supportive of your health and the life you want to live instead of your substances or your eating disorder behaviors. And cooking with yourself and others also creates an opportunity to be social, right? To utilize a social system as well. So I'm going to skip these guys again for the sake of time, but I'm happy to make this presentation available if you're interested in the things we didn't get to. Help is available. I work with Sanford Behavioral Health in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I also have a private practice through Holistic Counseling Center in Grand Rapids. It's called Authenticity Integrative Eating Disorder Treatment Program. This is the email for the admissions team at Sanford and the website for Sanford, as well as the phone number direct to our admissions team if you or a patient are struggling, or if you wanted to learn more about our programs or services. Thank you so much for your time and for your attention and for your presence this afternoon.
Thank you, Dr. Flores. Does anyone have any questions that they can either drop in the chat, or they're welcome to unmute themselves and ask? I have one question. Being someone that is needs to be gluten-free, are there things that someone who is gluten-free might be missing out from if they're like, I can't do the bread, or I can't do other things that are gluten?
That's a great question. I've never gotten that question before. I love it. I'm also gluten-free. I have celiac, so I'm a personal expert. If you are ensuring that you're adding grains and starches into your diet, there are plenty of non-gluten containing grains and starches that you can eat. So potatoes are one, squashes are another, right? Those are a starchy carb. Peas are a starchy carb. Any type of root vegetable is going to be a starchy carbohydrate, as well as rice, teff, quinoa, amaranth, millet. Thankfully, there are tons of options out there. So no, I think when I first started eating gluten-free, it felt very overwhelming and very challenging. But with time and with a little bit of exploration and a little bit of energy to learn kind of how to work with new ingredients, there's quite a lot there for you.
Thank you all for being here. MHAM has webinars about twice every month. We are doing a series with Sanford Behavioral Health, so we hope you check out our events on our website page, mha-mi.com/events. We also offer very affordable memberships as well. So again, have a wonderful weekend. Thank you, Dr. Flores, for being here. This has been fantastic. So much good information. And everyone, please have a wonderful rest of your day and safe weekend.